any gray area. And to the extent General Baldwin and others wish to speak to that more forcefully or to clarify that, I know he will. But I can assure you, when you have National Guards, Guardsmen and women doing, for example, surveillance with cameras, it's hard to distinguish between those that are participating in gun and drug activity versus those that may be just crossing the border illegally. And as a consequence, that I would term as a gray area that we will no longer participate in. We will clarify our role so that we can secure that assertion that was made by Governor Brown.
Governor, have you talked to former Governor Brown about this?
I haven't had the opportunity, but we've had multiple conversations previous to my taking the oath of office on this topic.
Governor?
Scott Lewis, Voice San Diego. So we did a piece about how the National Guard was involved in an immigration detention effort. How do you make sure that doesn't happen? And what exactly were the Guard units doing?
Well, we can talk more about that. General Baldwin can answer that, and from car maintenance to the work that they were doing as it relates to surveillance. There's other specific work that we think is appropriate. Again, we're going to build on that, and the general will come up in a moment and lay out the details of what the existing deployment. But I will say this, there's an additional point I need to make. This is also getting in the way of our National Guard being prepared for being redeployed overseas. They actually are doing work that precludes them from getting the training and the skills and the time off that is necessary to make sure that they're prepared for more appropriate deployment. So this is actually hurting our readiness, which is another point that should be emphasized in this executive order and in the letters in this redirection. Oh, excuse me.
In terms of paying for this, I know the state has to pick up the cost for fire. Do you have a number on how much that's going to cost?
Yeah, we have an estimate. It's in the sort of $8 to $10 million range,
Annual
roughly.
Ongoing?
Well, it depends how long we want to advance. I don't have the appropriation authority for multiple years, but I certainly am desirous of moving in a new direction, and we're looking potentially an appropriation in that $8 to $10 million range.
Governor Mike Leary from Case Area 3. What is your response to some Republicans in this building who say that your executive order ignores the issue of human sex trafficking?
Well, I think there's a great New Yorker piece that they should refer to, and they should be educated on this topic. There's a lot that's been stated, that a lot of it falls flat on the facts. The best piece on this was recently done, and I think you're going to be hearing more from Democrats nationally to suggest that that is a bit overstated, though an issue, nonetheless, that the real issue is drugs, the issue of guns. And on the issue of drugs, we actually have seen some success with our current deployment, and that's the issue that I want to tackle. And to the extent people are still part of that equation, we also will assist. But I'm not going to be hyperbolic on that, because I think that's also been used for political purposes and heightened to exaggerate intentionally. And again, I refer you to as the data and the studies on this have borne out that there's a contrary narrative.
So is your sense that it's a false narrative?
No, I think it's like many things. There's aspects that are true, but then they highlight those and overstate them in order to curry favor with a policy that's flawed in the first place. But nonetheless, there are legitimate concerns. They're just overstated from my humble perspective. The deeper issue is drugs. That's real. That's not manufactured.
Actually, Sir Major Baldwin, if you could address the specific mission in the border region, and I'm just curious what your perspective is on the troop morale. What are the soldiers thinking about their jobs? What are they doing on the day-to-day?
So the governor has directed us to only continue those mission sets, as he mentioned, that focus squarely on transnational criminal organizations and the drug threat. And those jobs will be the people that are doing the cargo container searches at the ports of entry and at Border Patrol checkpoints throughout Southern California, and also on our criminal intelligence analysts that use techniques that we develop in the war on terror to undo terrorist organizations, use those same techniques to help the law enforcement agencies take down criminal organizations.
That's going forward?
We're doing that mission now, that mission set now. Those will be the only two mission sets that we continue to do.
And then morale?
Morale remains high. The soldiers that are on that mission are going to be afforded opportunities to compete for these positions with CAL FIRE, to go do forest fuels management. A number of those soldiers are coming from one infantry battalion that's preparing to go into what we call its ready year, which means it has to be ready for overseas deployment to combat zones. Those soldiers will be going back to their unit to continue to train to prepare for overseas combat.
Where's that unit?
That unit's located in the greater Los Angeles area.
Major, the governor spoke about the National Guard being used to look for illegal marijuana grows. Is that a new assignment? Is that something you do now?
We do that now. So we have a counter-drug task force that's completely federally funded. No money flows through the state treasury, of about 225 people that currently assists local, federal, and state law enforcement agencies in getting after the narcotics problems within the state of California. The preponderance of those people are focused on marijuana eradication and going particularly after grows on public lands where the growers and the cartels do incredible environmental damage and environmental degradation. And indeed, we're involved in working with organizations like the Sierra Club in order to go and return the lands to its pristine state.
Can you address the gray area he described about immigration enforcement?
Sure. So we have not been involved in any detention of immigrants. However, as the governor mentioned, there is a gray area. If you are a camera operator, and we have a number of soldiers being camera operators, or you're working as a dispatcher, and as a camera operator, you see an intrusion across the border, someone coming across the border. Any intrusion across the border in between the ports of entry is illegal, even if you're a U.S. citizen. So our soldiers would report that to the Border Patrol for the Border Patrol to take action without knowing what the intent of the person that's crossing the border is, whether they are indeed criminals that are smuggling guns, doing human trafficking, or something even more nefarious to do harm to our country, or if it's someone here coming to seek a better life. We couldn't make the distinction between the two. That was up to the Border Patrol to sort out. Those tasks were within California state law and within the guidance that Governor Brown had given us. However, our current governor has decided that because there is a bit of a gray area and because there are other uses that our National Guard could be engaged in here in state or to prepare to go overseas, it's better to stay away from those areas and focus squarely on those tasks that we can directly relate to combating transnational threats.
So will there be any National Guardsmen involved in surveillance after this order takes effect?
Not under the current mission set.
And so I'm still a little confused on the timeline. If the mission is changing immediately or if the mission is changing March 31st?
We have a deadline pursuant to the existing agreement that requires by March 31st for this redeployment and these new directives to go into place.
The governor
is a 45-day process.
The governor is about to quite literally give me the order.
Okay.
And upon receipt of the order, we will begin working with the Border Patrol to have a phased redeployment plan to bring those soldiers and airmen off of those mission sets to transition to the other one. And that'll take about 45 days.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Governor, President Trump at one point threatened to take FEMA funds away from California. Has there been any follow-up on that? Are you at all concerned that taking the troops away from the border is going to kind of incite him more?
No, every day there's new concerns. And we were hopeful this weekend. We were hopeful last week that there was going to be an announcement, an agreement today. The Democrats and the administration coming together to address the prospect of yet another government shutdown. Obviously, that didn't take shape. The president announced a number of days ago that he was going to go down to El Paso. There are counter demonstrations in El Paso. You had the governor of New Mexico similarly make a commitment to redeploy National Guard. There are many factors. So I'm not concerned about what we're doing. I'm more concerned, frankly, about what's happening as it relates to those negotiations and the broader prospect that the president could walk us into yet another government shutdown or expose the state of California and or other states to a declaration of emergency that could precipitate, and this distinguishes itself from FEMA, could participate, or rather require reallocation of, for example, flood monies, disaster relief dollars that have already been allocated or at least directed for existing projects. That's a broader concern that we're obviously monitoring.
If he does that, does the state have any recourse?
We are, can assure you, we will address that appropriately, and over the course of the last few weeks, we have, with the Attorney General's office, been reviewing what that recourse may look like.
Governor, if you're, ending the agreement and the money that comes with it for this deployment effective, I guess, March 31st.
Correct.
Of your three prongs of your new mission, the first, state's funding. The second one, you're asking DOD to do separate and apart. The third one, you're trying to get money from that existing agreement that you're ripping up. How sure are you can get that money?
Well, if they don't do it, we'll bring the rest back. Not an issue with me. Look, we're trying to be very responsible here. I didn't just pull the entire Band-Aid off. I'm trying to acknowledge there's some legitimate concerns, but I'm not going to play into the hype and the politics. Those legitimate concerns, can be supported. Our efforts could be supported. We actually are working very collaboratively. There's good engagement. There's real rapport. And that's been demonstrated to me. The evidence has been provided to me. It's real, it's ample, and it's, I think, justifiable to consider that to continue. If they choose not to fund it, then they have more than enough resources to offset it. Rather than having our 100 National Guard, they have 3,750 U.S. military personnel, more than in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria combined. I mean, it's comedy, folks. You know it. I don't know what the right adjective is without coming off as hyperbolic. The whole thing is ridiculous. And by the way, those are not just 3,750 new troops. That's on top of however many thousands he had previously said he was going to deploy. And by the way, how about you start with spending some of the money you were appropriated last year, and how about you start actually hiring the folks that should really be doing this job? There's still hundreds of vacancies at Border Patrol. I mean, that's called governing. How about some accountability to govern? It seems to be lost in all of this, including the quote-unquote wall. He couldn't even spend the money they appropriated last year, and we're having this made-up discussion around $5.7 billion. By the way, what's $5.7 billion? Where did that number come from? The whole thing is absurd. I mean, we have to sort of step back and sort of ponder and reconsider and bracket this. The tens of billions of dollars. He's not even talking about finishing off a wall. What's the 5.7? I mean, it's just amazing to me how lazy we've become as a nation that we've even allowed this to perpetuate, and why I'm wasting my time up here when I should be focusing on housing and homelessness and other more important things than playing into this kind of cynicism and playing in this kind of politics and this kind of xenophobia and this kind of nativism, because that's what this is all about. It's pure political theater, period.
What do you mean by that? Amazing to me how lazy we become as a nation. Is that voters? Is that leaders?
All of us,
tease
the
that out a
punditry
little
on
more.
this. All of us. I mean, why don't we, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm a little old-fashioned. Maybe having been a former mayor, governor, I would imagine if you appropriated money and I'm the chief executive, you'd say, all right, well, tell me after you spend that money, then make a case for the new money. We don't even seem to have any accountability on previous appropriations. We just say, well, I just need another $5 billion. No, 5.7. And we just write it as if it's, it's this theater, the whole thing, we've allowed ourselves, we've been sucked into this vortex of the absurd, and I want to get out of it. And it's, that's what I was elected to do. And by the way, no one should be surprised by this. I was very vocal on the campaign trail about this. I wasn't critical, but I was cautiously, I was cautious and concerned about Governor Brown's original agreement, made that clear to him publicly and privately. And I think the only surprise, frankly, is that these guys were able to convince me that there was actually some really good work being done down there as it relates to drug trafficking, and I was willing to concur with that and continue to have 100 folks down there.
About how many troops are going to be reassigned to fire safety duty?
110 is the latest number. That's right. Yeah, for hand crews. And that's our current number, and that could change, but it's roughly 100, 110.
Do we know exactly what they're going to be doing?
Yeah, we have, working with CAL FIRE, and they've a specific protocol of training. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about these hand crews that you've got out there and how we're going to augment your training and support.
Sure. Thank you, Governor. Also, they will be led by CAL FIRE, so we're going to have CAL FIRE employees that are leading those crews. There will be training in how to use the proper tools and the personal protective equipment that's going to go along with that. They will be deployed across the state to projects that are geared toward protecting community.
So a lot of defensible space work. By the way, this is in the can't make it up. A lot of the work that could have been done and should have been done, except for the government shutdown. A lot of this work was curtailed in the government shutdown. I mean, another interesting point. Forgive me for finding that interesting.
Governor, if you were so insistent on, taking this action as you were on the campaign trail, why wait to do this withdrawal until we were basically coming to the end of this?
I wanted to be responsible about it. I wanted to work with the folks behind me. I've been here a whopping 33 days or something. So this is not late in my administration or tenure. It's very early. And I wanted to give the benefit of the doubt to the folks assembled behind me that did identify some good work being done. My initial inclination was to pull everybody back, but they presented me data. They presented me evidence. They were able to take the time to collect that data and evidence to suggest that some good work is being done. And in a way to be judicious and thoughtful about this, not sort of political about it, but sober about it, I agreed to at least the 100 folks staying behind.
Did you tell the president?
I haven't had a chance to talk directly to the president, but I did talk to the Homeland Security Director, and I've talked to other folks in the federal government, including the other side of the political aisle.
This is a bit off topic, but last week it was reported that the California National Guard was not going to force transgender soldiers out. And since the opportunity,
by the way, I thought that was the right decision. The question is, can we make that decision unilaterally?
Can you make that decision unilaterally?
That's an open-ended question. Dare I say, I suggest perhaps not, save for the reserves, which is a different category, where we do have that legal right. But for the Guard, I do not believe, based upon current reading of the law, that that's the case. That said, I'm in the don't ask, don't care business when it comes to this. And I hope and expect that that's generally the feeling of the general as well. But General, you can speak for yourself.
So I'll echo what the governor said. First of all, we have the governor and I command two separate and distinct organizations, the California National Guard, consisting of the Army National Guard and the Air National Guard, that are governed by federal regulation and federal law, in addition to state policy. Then the California State Military Reserve, which is California's true militia. For the California State Military Reserve, we've already written into our regulations that people that are transgender can serve in the State Military Reserve, and we will keep that policy in place. Within the California National Guard, our preference is that the Department of Defense sees the light, and transgender people should be allowed to continue to serve alongside all of the other fellow soldiers and airmen, because they bring value to our force. And if they're willing to pick up a rifle and follow us into combat, then they're welcome to be on our side to do harm against those who would do harm to us.
Do you know how many people, transgender people, this all affects?
So within the California National Guard, no, because as the governor pointed out, we don't ask, we don't care. So if we don't care how people gender identify. What we care about is, can you come to work? Can you perform your duties as a soldier and airman? Can you support and defend the Constitution of the United States? And are you willing to go into the fight and fight alongside of us? The answer is yes. We don't care how you gender identify.
And just another insult. Just to demean a group of folks, again, for purely political purposes is, again, disgraceful. It's un-American. And these are folks that put on a uniform every day, as the general said, to protect you, to protect this country and what it represents and its values. and they're yet again being scapegoated, purely again for political purposes. Last question, and then I'll sign this executive order and the letter.
Rachel Wolf, KLVR 13. So are you, just listening to what you're saying, are you going to ask the federal government to backfill in terms of funding for these crime-fighting positions?
Yeah, no, we expect we will negotiate the new terms of an MOU to the extent that they seem to have desired continuation of the entire deployment. I would imagine and hope they will continue to support at least a more modest deployment, and to the extent they don't, we're not going to subsidize it. We'll pull the rest of those individuals back. So I'm not concerned about the costs related to that. We will request partnership, and we'll request cost reimbursement for any redeployment into Northern California as it relates to cartel activity. If that's not forthcoming, if they're not interested in that, which in the past they've expressed that they are, then we'll have to reconsider. I don't expect going out of pocket on that either, though legitimately going to have to address some of those concerns, and with or without the National Guard, we'll need to pursue those.
Can I just
Last
ask one
point,
more
Andrew.
question, Governor?
Yeah.
You've mentioned housing and homelessness, not enough attention being paid to that. So I just one quick question on that.
I opened myself to that.
You've been unequivocal in your calls for housing to be a shared responsibility across California between cities and counties. Would you apply that same strong call to the services on homelessness?
Oh, we're all in this together.
So if cities and counties don't put enough shelters or permanent supportive housing or other...
Oh, you mean, am I going to sue cities?
Are you...
No, I'm not going. Look, I'm for accountability. I'm for consequence, which is, is loosely defined. But I also am for providing support, and the budget reflects an unprecedented amount of support to help jumpstart those efforts at the local level. I'll be talking more about that tomorrow at the State of the State, so you can get, I think, a more granular sense of what I mean by that.
Speaking of which, you said nobody gets excited about State of the State, so why
You shouldn't.
tomorrow?
You shouldn't. You should do something else. I encourage it. Yeah, I hold strong to my previous statements on that. But if you must, I'll see you around 11 tomorrow. The question is, when are we getting out of there? Is it one of those 2-hour speeches, 1-hour speech? I don't know.
Yeah, you do.
I don't. We never know. You may applaud, you may not. There could be interruptions. I don't know. We don't know. And I'm sounding like Governor Brown. I don't know. Things happen. But one thing I do know is that that we need to sign this, and we need to get started in this process. So I'm affixing my signature, and we've now formally, pursuant to this general order, this executive statement, are now directing the redeployment of our National Guard from the border, be reassigned, and then I have a letter to the Secretary of Defense basically reinforcing a number of the details that are laid out in that executive order that we also asked be sent and forwarded. And with that, I will bid you all adieu until tomorrow, if you're around.
Well, what's left to talk about now that you did that?
There's lots to talk about. There actually is.